What's good, everyone? This is Dr. Nee Darko. Make sure you hit the subscribe button below so that you're always up to date on the new uploads as well as alerts on this show. The other thing that you can do to help build this community is make sure you leave a comment below. Let us know what you like, what you don't like about the show, and ultimately, let us know who's winning these arguments, because I need to know that I'm beating Renee in these debates. Run the tape. Dr. Brian Williams, what's good, man? Welcome back to Docs Outside the Box. You've been really busy. A lot has changed since the last time we talked. You've run for office. You've published a book, which is amazing, that we're going to talk about. And you can see, everybody who's watching right now, you can see on his corner right there. The Bodies Keep Coming. And it's a really good book. And you've been making your rounds on TV. So thank you for joining us here, man. Let's catch up, man. How you been?
I've been good. Thanks for having me. And you've been busy too. I remember you've come a long way with the show. So I'm proud of you. I'm glad to see your success.
Yeah, man. Like, for y'all who are listening, you may not know, because we got a lot of new listeners now. Me and Dr. Brian go way back. We go way back as far as residency. So I was a resident while Dr. Brian was a fellow. We were at Grady Memorial Hospital. He was with Emory fellow, and he was in a class by himself. He was amazing fellow. And I was in my fourth year or fifth year. And we kind of just kind of vibed. And I think one of the biggest things that I have to thank Dr. Brian Williams for is he helped me bring my expectations up. I knew I wanted to go into trauma critical care. I don't know if you remember the story, Dr. Brian. I wanted to go into... What'd you say?
Oh, yeah, I remember we talked about this. And
I wanted to go into trauma critical care. Yeah, I wanted to go into trauma critical care, and I just happened to ask him, hey, what's your advice? And ultimately I just asked, hey, I'm going to be applying to a set of residency programs or fellowship programs. What do you think? And I literally handed him the fellowship programs that I was looking at. And let's just say, for someone coming from Morehouse and someone coming from Grady, the programs that I gave him, I think the easiest way to say, bro was disgusted with me. I gave him a list of, these are the programs. He literally took the paper and pap, what's wrong with you? These are all at what we would consider, if you are at big academic institutions, these are at programs that, let's just say they're not level 1 academic facilities, which they're great, but let's just say that wasn't in my line of sight, or that should not have been in my line of sight at that moment. But Dr. Brian took the time out to be patient with me and to help me understand expectations. And then the other thing that he also did is I gave him my essay. And I don't know if you remember this part. I redid my essay and I sent it to you because my first essay was really it just wasn't focused. And it was almost like a medical school essay, which is not needed for fellowship. So you really played a major part in me going to University of Miami. And then afterwards, my trajectory afterwards, giving me advice on certain things with the choices that I make with my job. And then ultimately we linked up and, became colleagues on, when I created Docs Outside the Box. And you were my first big interview where I traveled out to go and see you in Dallas after the events that occurred. That's written out in this book. So, y'all, me and Dr. Brian go way back, man. So,
there's so much in what you just said, Dr. Darko. Somebody did that for me when I was coming up. Clearly going to pay it forward for you, but it's about us overcoming our imposter syndrome, lowering our expectations of ourselves when we should be trying to exceed them. And also just say, you never know whose life you may impact, because the stories you told me, I had forgotten those until you reminded me of those. It shows you every single day you could be doing something that can change the trajectory of someone's life. So just
no
be
doubt.
kind.
No doubt. Be kind. Envision yourself in that position. And, just even the smallest of gestures, you don't have to give money. You just a little bit of time and caring, to look at someone's list and say, hey, I think you can do better than this, and really push that person. Not just, I think you could do better than this and walk away, but no, listen, these are the programs that I think you should be applying to, and here's why. So I really appreciate that a lot, man. Yeah. It's really changed the trajectory of my life and how, just any program I go to or any job that I go to. I do locums, y'all. So any place I go to and they look at my resume, they know I'm coming correct. And I got to say that's because of you. So, let's jump right into this book, man.
All right,
because
let's do it.
let's start from the book. The Bodies Keep Coming. That came out last year. You can find it anywhere on Amazon. But this is your deep, personal, and critical look at the intersection of racism, violence, and healthcare through the lens of a Black trauma surgeon. My man, there's so much to cover in here. I've like kept notes about all this stuff. I got like 10 points that I'm going to get through, but we can't get through all of this. But
Yeah.
let's start on what we do as trauma surgeons. You know, particularly where you were doing primarily your practice after training was at Parkland, one of the best trauma centers, one of the most famous trauma centers in Dallas. Obviously, there was a big event that occurred where you were taking care of police officers. Some of them survived, some of them didn't make it. But that's the crux of what kind of pushed you into national limelight. Someone like me working in Atlanta, like we see a lot of gun violence, and a lot of times we see it almost like a revolving door. Um, the question I have is, you know, based off of your perspective, based off of the book, based on the fact that you're running for, or you ran for politics and you were, you know, running for office, like, do you think we as a society, and I'm talking specifically here in the United States, have we just given up the fight on like making sure that like what happened 2 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago in Georgia, mass shootings, have we just gotten less sensitive to that and just like, yo, this is just the way how it is?
We cannot give up the fight. And I think you and I know this better than anyone because we see like this carnage is part of our day to day, right? And in the book, I really wanted to pull the reader into the story so that you see this. And I wanted it to be graphic but not gratuitous. I mean, you need to
Mm-hmm.
feel what's truly happening on the front lines of gun violence, and then it's also just shift the perspective, see what it's like to be a Black trauma surgeon, and you're taking care of so many young Black men that are being victimized by gun violence, and taking care of and dealing with the surviving families. Because I think that's a perspective that is frequently overlooked or minimized in the national debate. And if we're going to do something about gun violence as a whole in this country, we cannot forget many of the voices that are also impacted by this. So I was cognizant of like putting this through the lens of race from beginning to end and not be lecturing you about it, but pulling you in so you can feel what it's like to be on the front lines of this epidemic, what it means to be a community person of color in the profession, and those that are suffering from the violence.
So, what do you think is the answer, or what do you think is a good starting point with what's going on with guns? Mainly because, you know, you have something like what happens in Illinois and Chicago, where we find out that the majority, if not all, of the guns are coming from other states. Right, nobody's making Uzis in Chicago, right, or whatever they're making, or whatever the situation is with how guns get into the United States and so forth. Like when you decided to run for office, I know that that was a central point of, you know, part of your policy. Like, talk us through, like, what do you think is your answer? What would be your answer to being able to fight this issue? Because when I heard that you were running for office, I'm like, man, like that's got to be very frustrating to run for office, because in medicine it's I see problem, I take care of problem, problem's taken care of, and let's move on. Like there's no really compromise that occurs in medicine, right? Whereas in politics, that's all, like you got to do all that. So talk us through that how you get through that with gun violence and then with policy. Talk to us about that.
Well, first, I'll say anyone that spent any amount of time in academic medicine is well prepared to deal with going into politics.
Oh, really?
There are definitely some translatable experiences as far
Okay.
as dealing with personalities, and I'm saying that a little bit in jest, but it's true. A lot of it is about how do you deal with people and get your message across.
It feels like an
But in terms,
aristocracy in medicine,
right,
or dictatorship, you know. But I'm
right,
sorry, you keep
right.
going, man.
No, but when it comes to gun violence, we have to recognize that we do not have one problem, right? We have multiple gun violence problems, whether it's the community violence that you and I dealt with in Atlanta, the mass shootings, intimate partner violence, suicides, the preventable shootings of young children. So we have multiple different kinds of problems with different root causes, which require different solutions. There is no one size fits all.
Hmm.
So when I ran for Congress, I was trying to bring the perspective that is absent, right? There's never been a trauma surgeon in Congress. There's never been a Black doctor who could vote in Congress.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I brought my perspective as a trauma surgeon treating these patients.
I think the only surgeon's been what, Frist? Frist was a cardiothoracic surgeon, right?
Yes. I think
Yeah,
there may have
okay,
been another
but
surgeon, but
not
as far
trauma.
as a trauma surgeon.
Yeah, yeah,
And
got you.
there is a black female, but she's from the, I think it's U.S. Virgin Islands. So
Yeah, yes, she
she
is.
can't
Hmm.
vote. Yeah. You know, I'm also a veteran. I've trained on these weapons. I've lost family members to gun
Yeah,
violence. So
that's in the
bringing the
book. Yeah.
professional and the personal aspect to this to say, look, we can do something about saving lives. And I approach it without trying to vilify individuals for their choices, but talk about the societal structures that we can address through policy, right?
So what's
Because
one thing you think? What is one, give us one like a what's one policy thing you would push? Let's say
okay,
you were in Congress right now.
excuse me. Let's talk about just click off the ones that are obvious that people talk about all the time, right? Universal background checks, banning assault weapons, raising the minimum age to purchase a weapon, mental health services. We talk about those a lot, right? You and I know that if we were able to achieve all of that, this utopic society where that was all achieved, the gun violence that we deal with on a day to day in the neighborhoods would probably still continue unabated, right? Because
Hmm.
these are issues of structures that continue to put certain populations at risk of endemic violence. You know, good schools, affordable housing,
Right.
well-paying jobs, all these what people call those social determinants of health, which I prefer to call social drivers of health. They drive poor health outcomes. Like we need to invest in that as well. Um, you know, like policing is part of it, right? But where I live, I may see a cop drive through my neighborhood once every couple of months, right? But there's not a whole lot of violence here. So the answer is not always more police will be the solution,
Hmm.
because if that was the case, I would see them around here all the time. So what is it about where I live that leads to less violence? You know, decent paying job, good schools, good homes. Let's provide that for everyone. That will lead to reduced violence. And we have the research, right? The Department of Justice, a lot of academic studies. There are plenty of studies that show that those things will contribute and decrease the amount of gun violence that we have in this country.